Imagine a figure whose shadow has covered the history of humanity for 2,000 years. Billions of pages have been written about him. Wars have started and civilizations have been created because of him. But if we cast aside faith, cast aside emotion, and look at the dry facts, what remains? Who is this man who divided time into before and after? In an era of post-truth and digital noise, we cannot rely on ancient scrolls the way our ancestors did. We need a new tool: cold, calculating, impartial. We have activated the Logos 7 protocol. This is a latest generation analytical neural network capable of processing vast arrays of historical, archaeological, and astronomical data, finding hidden correlations inaccessible to the human brain. We have tasked the system with a mission that seems impossible: to assemble a puzzle from scattered fragments of antiquity and answer the ultimate question. Did Jesus of Nazareth exist as a physical object in space and time? Or is this the greatest mystification in history? Chapter 1. Source Code. Nazareth. Let us transport ourselves back. Not to the fairy tale sets of Christmas cards, but to reality. Judea, the 1st century AD. The eastern fringe of the Roman Empire. This is not a calm place for philosophical discourse. It is a powder keg. The air here reeks of dust, sheep manure, and fear. Roman legions clad in iron control the roads. Taxes strangle the population. In the shadows of narrow streets, zealots sharpen zike, short daggers, dreaming of slitting the throats of the occupiers. People are waiting for a Messiah, not as a good shepherd, but as a warlord who will throw the Romans into the sea with fire and sword. It is into this setting that we attempt to place our hero. The first problem Logos 7 encountered is what historians call the effect of silence. If Jesus performed miracles, gathered thousands of people, and threatened Rome's authority, why do documents of that time remain silent about him? Why is there not a single coin with his profile? Not a single statue? Not a single order signed by Pontius Pilate mentioning this name? Skeptics argue this proves Christ is a myth. They say he is a composite image, a solar cult rewritten for a new tune. We uploaded this thesis into Logos 7, comparing it against the database of famous figures of antiquity. The result was unexpected. The system conducted a comparative analysis with other figures of that era. Take, for example, Arminius, the Germanic chieftain who destroyed 3 Roman legions. We know less about him than we do about Jesus, even regarding Pilate himself, until the discovery of a single slab in Caesarea in 1961. There was almost no archaeological evidence. The algorithm highlighted 3 key independent sources unrelated to Christians. The Roman historian Tacitus, who wrote of Christus, who suffered the extreme penalty during the reign of Tiberius at the hands of one of our procurators, Pontius Pilatus, the Jewish commander Josephus Flavius, and the Roman biographer Suetonius. Logos 7 performed a linguistic analysis of these texts to rule out later interpolations by scribes. The system's verdict is unequivocal. The probability that all 3 sources are falsified is less than 0.3%. The core of these texts is authentic. For artificial intelligence, this means one thing. The object codenamed Jesus left a physical footprint in the information matrix of the 1st century. He was real. But if he was real, when exactly was he born? Here we encounter the first serious error in the official version. We are used to counting years from his birth. But Logos 7, analyzing chronological markers, discovered a fatal mismatch. The Gospels claim Jesus was born during the time of King Herod the Great, but historical chronicles clearly record Herod died in 4 BC. This means Jesus could not have been born in year 0 or year 1. He must have been born earlier. The system constructed a timeline and pointed to a range between 7 and 4 BC. Paradox: Christ was born before Christ. Next, we loaded data about the famous Star of Bethlehem into the system. What was it? A beautiful fiction to add grandeur to the moment, Or a real astronomical phenomenon? Logos 7 ran a simulation of the starry sky over the Middle East with a step of 1 day over 10 years. The results of the astronomical reconstruction are astounding. The system discarded hypotheses about comets, as in antiquity comets were considered harbingers of disaster and doom, not the birth of kings. However, planetary constellations yielded a 100% match. In 7 BC, a strictly rare event occurred in the constellation of Pisces, a triple conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn. To a modern human, these are just two bright dots in the sky. But Logos 7 analyzed this event through the prism of Babylonian astrology of that time. Jupiter is the star of kings. Saturn is the star protecting the Jewish people. The constellation of Pisces was associated with the birth of a new era. For observers from the East, those very magi, this was not just a beautiful sight. It was a message written in letters of fire on the black velvet of the cosmos. A great king is being born in Judea. According to the system's calculations, the probability of such an astronomical event coinciding by chance with the period described in the texts is negligible. This is yet another argument that a real chronology lies behind the legend. Now let us analyze one of the most controversial points: the census. Luke writes that Joseph and Mary went to Bethlehem because of a census decreed by Quirinius. Historians have laughed at this for centuries, pointing out that Quirinius became governor of Syria only in 6 AD, 10 years after Herod's death. Checkmate, seemingly. The Bible is wrong. But we asked Logos 7 to conduct a deep search in Roman administrative archives and cross-reference the careers of Roman officials. The system discovered an interesting pattern. Quirinius did indeed conduct a census in 6 AD, but there is circumstantial evidence that he held a high military post in the region earlier, precisely during the period of Jesus' supposed birth. Furthermore, the system found analogies in Roman paperwork. Censuses in provinces took years. It was a sluggish, bureaucratic machine. It is quite probable that the decree was issued under one ruler and completed under another. However, Logos 7 points to another oddity. The requirement for everyone to return to their own city for the census looks economically absurd. Imagine if, to file your tax return, you had to travel to the city where your great-great-grandfather was born 1,000 years ago. The Romans were pragmatists. They would not have paralyzed the provincial economy with such a requirement. The system suggests that the journey to Bethlehem might have been triggered not by a Roman decree, but by internal clan obligations or land inheritance issues, which the Gospel authors later tied to global history to confirm prophecies. Here we see the work of what the neural network classifies as editorial narrative. Moving on. Location. Nazareth. Why Nazareth? If you are inventing a savior of the world, you do not place him in Nazareth. It is like saying in the 21st century that the future president of Earth was born in an abandoned settlement with no name on the map. In the 1st century, Nazareth was not even on the lists of cities mentioned in the Talmud or the Old Testament. It was a tiny hamlet with a population calculated by Logos 7 to be between 200 and 400 people. Archaeological data loaded into the system paints a depressing picture. No marble columns, no synagogues with mosaics, simple houses, often built onto natural caves. People lived in poverty, working hard on the land. The phrase from the Gospel, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" is not just a rhetorical question. It is a social verdict of that time. The sticks, the boondocks, a hole. Behavioral psychology analysis conducted by the system tells us if the story were fiction, the Messiah would have been housed in Jerusalem or Bethlehem permanently. The connection to Nazareth is the so-called criterion of embarrassment, a fact so inconvenient and unprestigious that it was impossible to invent. It could have survived in history for only one reason. It was the truth. Jesus really grew up in this God-forsaken village, But who was he in the eyes of his neighbors? We are used to calling him the carpenter's son. The Greek word tekton used in the texts is traditionally translated as carpenter, but Logos 7, analyzing the semantic field of this word in the 1st century, suggests a correction. In wood-scarce Judea, where houses were built of stone and clay, tekton is more likely a mason, a universal builder, a man who earns his bread through heavy physical labor. The system models the physical appearance of such a man. Forget the slender fingers and pale skin from icons. Before us stands a man with rough, weathered skin, developed musculature, calloused hands accustomed to the weight of stone and wood. He walked tens of kilometers under the scorching sun. This was a physically strong, enduring man of the working class. And now the most interesting part, the demographics of the name. What was our subject called? The name Jesus is the Greek transliteration of the Hebrew name Yeshua. We asked Logos 7 to calculate the frequency of this name in 1st century Judea, based on data from ossuaries, bone boxes for burial. The statistical results show that Yeshua was one of the most popular male names of the time, ranking in the top 5. About 1 in 20 men bore this name. It is like Alexander or Michael today. This creates an identification problem for researchers. Finding Yeshua, son of Joseph, in the archives is like looking for John Smith in a New York phone book. However, this very ordinariness of the name plays into the reality of the story. He did not bear a unique divine title from birth. He was one of many, Yeshua of Nazareth. The system discovered an interesting pattern. In the early layers of tradition, he is called exactly that, without the title, Christ, Messiah. This is a marker that initially he was perceived as a simple man, a neighbor, a countryman. Logos 7 also analyzed the social status of his family. The legend that he was a pauper is not entirely supported by data. The profession of a builder-craftsman was in demand. Moreover, a few kilometers from Nazareth, the construction of the major city of Sepphoris, the administrative center of Galilee, was underway. The neural network, with a high degree of probability, 85%, suggests that the young Jesus and his father could have worked on this giant construction site. This changes everything. It means he did not sit in isolation. He saw Roman culture, heard Greek speech, saw the theater and baths. He was at the crossroads of civilizations. This explains where he later acquired such broad views, uncharacteristic of a closed Jewish society. Summing up the first chapter, we turn to the final conclusion of the Logos 7 system. We loaded all variables: Roman chronicles, Jewish texts, astronomical charts, Nazareth archaeology, and demographic statistics. The question was simple. What is the probability that Jesus is a fictional character, a myth with no real prototype? The system's answer is unequivocal and ruthless to theorists of the mythological school. The probability that Jesus did not exist is less than 0.01%. The number of cross-references, inconvenient facts, and historical details that are impossible to invent retroactively is too great. We are dealing with a real human being. A man born roughly in the 6th year BC, raised in a poor but working-class family in Galilee, who worked as a builder and bore a very common name. He was flesh of the flesh of his time, walked the same dusty earth, breathed the same air. Source code, Nazareth, confirmed. The object is real. But here arises the next, far more complex question. How did this provincial builder, who seemingly had no chance for an education, manage to create a teaching that overturned the world? Where did a mason's son get a level of intellect and command of the word that silenced learned men of the law? Was it divine intervention? Or are we dealing with a genius whose nature we have yet to unravel? We loaded the texts of his speeches into the linguistic analysis module. What Logos 7 discovered in the structure of his sentences and the logic of his parables is shocking. This is not the speech of a simple craftsman. Hidden there are patterns pointing to a completely different level of consciousness. But more on that in the next chapter. Chapter 2. The Intellect. In the first chapter, we establish the physical reality of the object. Jesus of Nazareth existed. He walked the earth, breathed the air of Galilee, and worked with his hands. But the presence of a body is only half the equation. The greatest mystery lies not in his biography, but in his mind. Imagine the situation. A provincial builder holding no official spiritual rank, not educated in the elite schools of Jerusalem, goes out to the people. And as soon as he opens his mouth, something inexplicable happens. Thousands follow him. His words are memorized on the first try and passed from mouth to mouth for decades before being written down. Experienced lawyers of the time, scribes and Pharisees who spent their lives studying the law, try to trap him, but every time they are defeated by his logic. How is this possible? Where did a carpenter's son get a rhetorical arsenal worthy of the best philosophers of Greece and Rome? To answer this question, we loaded all known statements of Jesus, parables, sermons, dialogues, and short aphorisms, into the linguistic analysis module of the Logos 7 system. We tasked the artificial intelligence with reconstructing the intellectual profile of the speaker, determining his IQ level, education, and psychotype. The first problem the system encountered was the language barrier. The Gospels reached us in Koine Greek, but Jesus did not preach in Greek in the synagogues. His native language was Aramaic, the language of the streets and markets of the Middle East at that time. This creates layers of distortion. However, Logos 7 is capable of what is called reverse linguistic engineering. The system analyzed the Greek text and identified persistent Aramaic idioms, rhythm, and phrase structures within it, which shine through the translation like bones through skin. The analysis showed Jesus' speech possesses a unique poetic structure. It is not just prose. It is a complex rhythmic recitative built on parallelisms and antitheses. Such a structure was used by the ancients to ensure the text was seared into the listener's memory. Logos 7 isolated a pattern. Over 80% of his statements are constructed as mnemonic formulas. This is a memorization technology. He didn't just speak. He encoded information for maximum virality in an oral environment. But did he only speak Aramaic? Here the system detects an interesting anomaly. Analysis of dialogues with the Roman procurator Pontius Pilate and the centurion in Capernaum shows an absence of intermediaries or translators in the text. Usually, if a translator is needed, ancient texts mention it. Here, the conversation flows directly. We cross-reference this with geographical data from the first chapter. Nazareth was only a few kilometers from Sepphoris, a major Hellenistic center. If Jesus worked on construction, he had to understand technical and commercial Greek to communicate with clients and suppliers. Logos 7 estimates the probability that Jesus was at least bilingual at 92%. Furthermore, his quoting of the Torah indicates fluency in ancient Hebrew, the language of high liturgy, which the common people barely understood anymore. 3 languages. For a hick from Nazareth, this is already an outstanding indicator of cognitive flexibility. Now let's move to the main point, the intelligence test. Of course, we cannot give Jesus a modern questionnaire to fill out, but psychometrics allows us to evaluate so-called verbal intelligence by the complexity of constructed meanings and reaction speed in debates. Logos 7 analyzed scenes of Jesus' disputes with the religious elite. These were not just arguments. They were intellectual duels of the highest caliber. The Pharisees used classic casuistry, trying to corner him into logical dead ends. The famous question about the tax to Caesar. Is it lawful to give tribute to Caesar or not? This is the perfect trap. Say yes. The people will curse you as a traitor and collaborator with the occupiers. Say no. The Romans will arrest you as a rebel. There's no exit. An ordinary person would start making excuses or dodging the answer. What does Jesus do? The system classifies his answer as a paradigm shift. He asks to be shown the coin. He forces the opponents to acknowledge Rome's power themselves. After all, they carry this money in their pockets, and then delivers a formula that delineates the spheres of influence of religion and state. Render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. In a split second, he finds a third solution in a binary system. The algorithm analyzed dozens of such episodes. The speed of information processing, the ability to find non-standard exits from logical traps, the use of multi-level metaphors. All this allowed Logos 7 to form an estimated IQ score. The result is in the range of 160 to 180 points. This is the level of genius. This is the level of Newton, Einstein, or Pascal. But from where? Where did a builder's son get such intellect? Genetics, random mutation, or education? We asked the system to analyze his teaching methods, and here we see another broken pattern. At that time, there was a rigid tradition. Any teacher must cite authorities of the past. As Rabbi so-and-so said, as it is written in the interpretation, it was a culture of citation. Jesus completely ignores this academic protocol. A linguistic marker that Logos 7 highlighted as unique is the phrase, Amen, Amen, I say to you, or truly, I say to you. The word Amen in Jewish culture was placed at the end of a phrase as confirmation of agreement. Jesus places it at the beginning. This is linguistic audacity. It means, I myself am the source of truth. I do not need references. The psychological profile built by the system based on this data shows a personality with colossal internal autonomy and absolute confidence in his own righteousness. In modern psychiatry, this might border on megalomania, were it not for one but. His logic is flawless, and his ethical system is incredibly balanced. Let's dissect his main tool, parables. Many consider them simple fairy tales for uneducated fishermen. But Logos 7 sees complex algorithmic structures in them. A parable is not a fable with a moral. It is a cognitive virus. Take the parable of the Good Samaritan. The system breaks it down into components. Jesus starts with a classic setup, lulling the vigilance of the Jewish listener. A priest walks by. A Levite walks by. The listener expects that now an ordinary Israelite will appear and save the wounded man. This is the standard ternary structure of folklore. But Jesus breaks this pattern. He introduces a Samaritan, an enemy, an outcast, someone hated at a genetic level. This is a shock. It ruptures the template. Analysis shows that Jesus masterfully used the technique of cognitive dissonance. He forced the listener to identify with the enemy to understand the essence of mercy. This is the highest level of psychology. He didn't give ready-made answers. He triggered a thought process. He forced the listener's brain to work in a new mode. Another interesting aspect revealed by Logos 7 is the use of irony and hyperbole. A camel passing through the eye of a needle, a log in the eye. These are examples of vivid, figurative humor bordering on the absurd. This speaks of a lively, sharp mind, devoid of religious fanaticism and pedantry. The psychotype drawn by the neural network, a charismatic leader, an introvert with developed empathy, prone to lateral thinking and disregarding social hierarchies. But back to the question of education. Could he have learned all this in Nazareth? The system analyzed the availability of education in first-century Galilee. Elementary school at the synagogue provided only the basics of literacy and knowledge of the Torah. Higher schools were in Judea. There is no evidence that Jesus left Galilee to study. However, text analysis shows profound knowledge not only of Scripture, but also of oral traditions that would later enter the Mishnah and Talmud. He argues with Pharisees on their turf, using their own methods of interpretation, kal vachomer, from light to heavy, and other hermeneutic techniques. Here, Logos 7 detects a critical discrepancy. On one hand, We have a confirmed fact. He did not learn. The Jews themselves say this with surprise in the Gospel of John. How does this man know letters, having never learned? On the other hand, we see the competence level of a doctor of theology. How to explain this phenomenon? An autodidact? A genius who reconstructed the entire system of law from scraps of scrolls in a village synagogue? The system considers the probability of such a scenario low, about 12%. The knowledge is too specific, the nuances too subtle. This leads us to a hypothesis that we will examine in the next chapter. There is a giant gap in Jesus' biography. We know about his birth. We know about his debut in preaching around the age of 30. But where was he and what was he doing from age 12 to 30? 18 years of silence. 18 years during which a boy turned into a man, and a carpenter's son into the greatest orator and thinker. Logos 7 conducted a comparative analysis of Jesus' ethical teachings and philosophical currents of that time. The system discovered strange patterns uncharacteristic of Judaism. Calls to turn the other cheek, love for enemies, rejection of worldly goods. These ideas sound dissonant in the context of Old Testament eye for an eye morality, but they find surprising resonances in other regions of the ancient world. Could he have traveled? Could this brilliant mind have absorbed wisdom not just in Nazareth? The linguistic fingerprint we just analyzed points to a man with global thinking that went far beyond his province. His mind was an open system, ready to synthesize entirely new ideas. Summary of Chapter 2. We are dealing with a unique intellectual phenomenon. Linguistic analysis proves that Jesus possessed a genius-level intellect, mastered complex psychotechniques for influencing an audience, and possessed oratory skills, all without having a formal classical education. This is the Mozart effect in theology. But genius requires food. The mind needs information to process. If he didn't get it in the schools of Jerusalem, where did he get it? Where do the tracks from Nazareth lead? In the next chapter, we activate the predictive route modeling module. We will attempt to peer into history's blind spot. We will follow the tracks of caravans going east and south to test the boldest versions of Jesus' silent years. India? Egypt? Or the Qumran caves of the Essenes? Logos 7 is ready to give its forecast. Chapter 3. The Silent Years. 18 years. Think about that time frame. It is a whole lifetime. In 18 years, a person has time to be born, grow up, finish school, fall in love, become disillusioned, and form their personality. In the biography of the most influential figure in human history, there is a gaping hole of exactly this size. The last time we see Jesus in the Gospels is as a 12-year-old boy conversing with teachers in the Jerusalem temple. Then the curtain falls. Darkness. Total radio silence. And the curtain rises again only when he turns 30 and he steps onto the banks of the Jordan to be baptized. Where was he? What was he doing? How was his worldview formed? The official church tradition offers a version that the Logos 7 system flags as statistically unlikely. We are told he simply lived in Nazareth, built houses, fixed plows, and was an obedient son. But we already established in the previous chapter, before us is a genius with an off-the-charts IQ and global thinking. Geniuses do not sit in remote villages for 30 years only to burn out in 3, changing the world. A genius needs an environment. He needs challenges. He needs information. We activated the geolocation modeling and comparative religious studies module of Logos 7. The task: fill the gap between the 12th and 30th year of the object's life. We will check the 3 most popular hypotheses: the Himalayan route, the Ascend Trail, and the Egyptian vector, using data on trade routes, visa regimes of the 1st century, and travel costs. But before sending Jesus on a journey, Logos 7 identified a critical social anomaly that puts a cross on the version he just sat at home. In 1st century Jewish society, There was a rigid social imperative. A man must marry. Marriage was not a right, but a sacred duty. At 18, a young man was expected to lead a bride down the aisle. Rabbis taught, a man without a wife is not a complete man. By 30, a healthy man in Galilee should have had several children. A bachelor at 30 is nonsense, a scandal, a suspicious character. If Jesus had lived in Nazareth all those years and not married, it would have caused such gossip that it would certainly have been reflected in the texts. Neighbors would have teased him. Pharisees would have used it as an argument against him. You couldn't even start a family, what are you teaching us? But this is absent. The topic of his marriage is completely missing from canonical texts. The Logos 7 system interprets this silence unambiguously. He was not in Nazareth during marriageable age. Either he took a vow of celibacy, which is characteristic of some closed sects, or he was physically absent from the region where the community would have pressured him. This is the starting point for our investigation. He left. But where to? Hypothesis 1. India and Tibet. In the late 19th century, Russian journalist Nicholas Notovich published a sensational book claiming he found manuscripts in a Buddhist monastery in Ladakh about the prophet Issa, who came from the West. This theory still excites minds today. Was Jesus a Buddhist? We asked Logos 7 to calculate the logistical probability of such a journey for a carpenter's son from Galilee. Route: the Great Silk Road. Distance: over 5,000 kilometers one way, through the Parthian Empire, the deserts of Iran, the mountains of the Hindu Kush. Travel time: from 6 months to a year, one way under favorable conditions. Cost: analysis of the economic model of the first century shows that such a journey required colossal resources: guards, border tolls, provisions. A lone traveler without money had survival chances close to zero. He would have been killed or sold into slavery within the first 100 kilometers. However, the system admits the possibility that he could have joined a trade caravan as a worker or servant. This lowers the financial entry barrier. But let's look at the ideological component. Logos 7 conducted a comparative analysis of Jesus' teachings and the tenets of Buddhism and Hinduism of that time. Yes, there are superficial coincidences, non-violence, rejection of earthly riches, but the fundamental architecture is different. Eastern teachings are built on the cyclical nature of time, karma, and reincarnation. The goal is to exit the wheel of rebirth, to dissolve the personality into nirvana. Jesus' teaching is linear. There is a beginning, there is the end of the world, there is the last judgment. Personality is preserved, the body is resurrected. No reincarnation. His God is not a faceless absolute, but a person, a father. System verdict: the correlation between the Gospel and the Vedas is less than 15%. If Jesus had studied with Brahmins for 15 years, he would have brought the concept of karma to Judea. He did not. The probability of a journey to India is low. Most likely this is a beautiful legend of the Romantic era. Hypothesis 2. Qumran and the Essenes. This is geographically much closer. The desert by the Dead Sea, just a day's journey from Jerusalem. There lived the closed sect of Essenes, sons of light. They awaited the Messiah, wore white robes, practiced communal meals and ritual ablutions. The Dead Sea Scrolls, found in the 20th century, showed many parallels with Christianity. We loaded the community rule of the Essenes into Logos 7 and superimposed it on Jesus' psychological profile. Matches, celibacy, eschatological expectations of the end of the world, harsh criticism of the official temple priesthood, use of the term New Testament. It would seem, bingo. Jesus was an Essene who fled the monastery to preach to the world. But the system discovers fatal contradictions in behavioral patterns. The Essenes were obsessed with ritual purity. They hated women, foreigners, and cripples. Touching a sick person was considered defilement. Jesus constantly breaks these taboos. He touches lepers, he allows prostitutes to wash his feet, he eats with tax collectors, traitors to the homeland, and Gentiles. For an Essene, this is spiritual suicide. An Essene is an ascetic living in the desert. Jesus, by his own words, the Son of Man came eating and drinking. His first miracle was creating hundreds of liters of wine at a wedding. This is anti-Essene behavior. Neural network conclusion. Jesus definitely knew about the Essenes. Perhaps his cousin John the Baptist came from this environment. His profile matches Essene asceticism perfectly. Jesus could have visited Qumran, studied their scrolls, argued with them, but he was not one of them. His teaching is the overcoming of their insularity. He took their strictness and turned it inside out, transforming it into love for outcasts. Hypothesis 3, the Egyptian vector. And here, Logos 7 records the highest percentage of probability. Let's look at the map. Alexandria in Egypt was the New York of the ancient world, a giant metropolis, a port, a library, the Mausion. The largest and wealthiest Jewish diaspora lived there, about 1 million people. There, Greek philosophy of Plato met Jewish wisdom of the Torah. It was there that the Bible was translated into Greek, the Septuagint. The system finds strange mentions in the Talmud, a Jewish code of law written by enemies of Christianity. It speaks of a certain Yeshua ben Pandera, who brought magic out of Egypt in scratches on his body, meaning tattoos or notes so as not to forget. Rabbis accused him not of being an impostor, but of being a sorcerer who learned secret arts in the land of the pyramids. Why is this version so attractive to artificial intelligence? First, logistics. Merchant ships and caravans traveled between Judea and Egypt constantly. It was accessible. Second, the Gospel of Matthew says the family fled to Egypt when Jesus was an infant. They had connections, relatives, a base there. Returning there in his youth would be a logical step to find work and knowledge. What could Jesus find in Alexandria? Medicine. Egypt was famous for its doctors and pharmacologists. What Galilean peasants perceived as a miracle could have been advanced science in Alexandria. Treatment of eye diseases, working with mental disorders, exorcising demons, using oils and herbs. Philosophy. The school of Philo of Alexandria flourished there, introducing the concept of logos, the divine word, the mediator between God and humans. The Gospel of John begins with this very concept. In the beginning was the Word, logos. This is a purely Alexandrian philosophical import. Logos 7 models the following scenario. A gifted young man, feeling the confinement of Nazareth, sets off for Alexandria. He spends 10 to 12 years there. He works, after all. He is a builder, and a metropolis is always building. Learns, absorbs the wisdom of the Greeks and the secrets of the Egyptians. He sees the world in all its diversity. He forms his unique synthesis, the ethics of Jewish prophets, plus the universalism of Greek philosophy, plus practical healing skills. Then around 30 AD, he returns. He returns changed. He speaks with an accent, perhaps not linguistic but semantic. He is dressed like a poor man, but thinks like a king. He is a stranger among his own. In the synagogue of Nazareth, when he first reads the scroll of Isaiah, people are in shock. Is this not the carpenter's son? From where does he have such wisdom and powers? Note the word powers. The Greek dynamis is not just wisdom, it is the ability to perform miracles. His countrymen do not recognize him. This is a classic reaction to a person who left for a long time and returned changed beyond recognition. But there is a fourth option, which Logos 7 synthesized based on data about the city of Sepphoris. What if he didn't need to go to Egypt to see Egypt? Sepphoris, the ornament of all Galilee, was just 6 kilometers from Nazareth, an hour's walk. It was a city built by Herod Antipas in the Roman style. There was a theater for 4,000 seats. There were baths with mosaics depicting the Nile and Egyptian mysteries. Greek and Latin were spoken there. The system suggests Jesus could have lived a double life. By day, working on construction in cosmopolitan Sepphoris, immersion in a bubbling cauldron of cultures. By evening, returning to quiet, conservative Nazareth. 18 years of such a pendulum would create a unique effect. He understood the pain of the common people, but mastered the language and logic of the imperial elite. He was a bridge between two worlds. This explains why he was understood by both Roman centurions and poor fishermen. So what is the bottom line? The Logos 7 analysis rejects the version of the homebody. Jesus of the silent years period is an active researcher. The probability that he left Nazareth for a long period is 88%. The most likely destination is Egypt or intense interaction with the Hellenistic environment of major Decapolis cities. He was looking for answers. He saw the injustice of the world, the wealth of Rome, and the poverty of his people, the hypocrisy of priests and the suffering of the sick. In these 18 years, that steel core was forged in his consciousness, which would later allow him to go to the cross and not break. He didn't just wait for his hour. He prepared. He accumulated a potential that was destined to explode. But now, he returns. The training period is over. The period of action begins. And these actions go beyond the understanding of the physics of that time. Walking on water, turning water into wine, raising the dead. A modern skeptic will say, these are myths. The laws of nature are unbreakable. But is that so? We loaded descriptions of miracles into the physical analysis and mass psychology module. Was it mass hypnosis? The use of forgotten technologies? Or are we encountering something that modern science is only beginning to grope for in the field of quantum mechanics? In the next chapter, we will dissect the algorithm of the miracle. We will test every supernatural event for durability. Prepare yourself, because the conclusions of the Logos 7 system about the nature of these phenomena may overturn your conception of reality. What we considered magic might turn out to be technology of a completely different order. Chapter 4. The Algorithm of Miracles. In the previous chapters, we established that Jesus was a real historical figure, possessed phenomenal intellect, and most likely spent his silent years absorbing the knowledge of advanced civilizations of the time. But now we approach the red line, the border where history ends and mysticism begins, or physics, miracles. They were the fuel for the rocket of Christianity. If Jesus had simply said smart things, he would have remained in history as just another talented rabbi like Hillel, but he did things that broke the laws of reality. He walked on water, calmed storms with a single word, turned water into wine, and raised the dead. A modern person, raised on physics textbooks, reacts to this unambiguously. Impossible. These are fairy tales, metaphors, inventions of fanatics. But our task is neither to believe nor to deny. Our task is to analyze. We loaded 35 canonical miracles of Jesus into the Logos 7 system. We asked the neural network to run each event through the filters of modern science, medicine, psychology, quantum mechanics, and probability theory. We are seeking the answer to the question, what was it? Mass hypnosis? Use of forgotten technologies? Sleight of hand? Or are we dealing with a hacker who cracked the code of the universe itself? Let's start with the most massive category of miracles, healings. The blind see, the paralyzed stand, lepers are cleansed. Logos 7 conducted a cross-analysis of medical cases described in the Gospels. The system immediately highlighted an interesting pattern. In most cases, Jesus requires one condition from the patient, Faith. Your faith has saved you. He doesn't say, I saved you. He says, your faith. From the point of view of modern neurophysiology, this triggers a powerful placebo mechanism. We know that the human brain is a biochemical factory. Under the influence of severe emotional shock or ecstatic expectation, the body is capable of releasing a cocktail of endorphins and cortisol into the blood, which can temporarily block pain or mobilize hidden reserves. Logos 7 classifies many cases of paralysis in the Bible as conversion disorders. This is when deep psychological trauma causes physical infirmity. Legs are healthy, nerves are intact, but the brain blocks the signal. Jesus arrives, a charismatic leader, authority. He looks into their eyes. He creates incredible tension in the moment. The crowd freezes, and he gives the command, stand up. For the patient's psyche, this becomes a reset trigger. The block is removed. The person stands up. For the crowd, it is a miracle. For science, it is radical psychosomatic therapy. The probability that about 60% of healings have a psychogenic nature, according to the system's calculations, is 95%. But there are the remaining 40%, those that cannot be explained by psychology. Leprosy. This is a bacterial infection destroying tissues. Psychosomatics cannot kill bacteria. Congenital blindness. Atrophy of the optic nerve. Here we tread on shaky ground. Logos 7 draws attention to Jesus' methods. Sometimes he just speaks a word, and sometimes he uses tools. In the case of the man born blind, he spits on the ground, makes clay, mud, and anoints the eyes. Why? If you are God, why do you need mud? Analysis of the composition of Galilee soils and medical practices of Egypt, recall our hypothesis from chapter 3, yields an unexpected result. In antiquity, saliva was considered an antiseptic, and certain types of clays were used to reduce inflammation. But this is insufficient to restore a dead nerve. The system puts forward the hypothesis of bioenergetic resonance. If we assume that Jesus possessed the ability to control the electromagnetic fields of his own body, which is recorded in some phenomena like Qigong masters but on a much smaller scale, he could stimulate tissue regeneration at the cellular level. It sounds like science fiction, but from the standpoint of physics, it is merely a question of concentration and directed energy transfer. Now let's move to the manipulation of matter. The wedding at Cana of Galilee, turning water into wine. This is the first miracle, and it is the most technologically complex. Skeptics say, switching vessels, servants were bribed, guests were drunk. But let's look at the volumes. The text speaks of 6 stone water jars containing 2 or 3 measures each. Logos 7 recalculated first century volume measures. We are talking about roughly 500 or 600 liters of liquid. Smuggling half a ton of wine into a wedding unnoticed, where dozens of guests crowd and servants bustle, is a logistically impossible task. What happened at the level of molecular physics? Water is H2O. Wine is a complex solution. Alcohols, sugars, tannins, essential oils. Water lacks the carbon atoms necessary to create sugar and alcohol. To turn water into wine, one needs to perform nuclear fusion. One needs to take oxygen and hydrogen atoms and, adding carbon, which is not in water, but is in the air as carbon dioxide, to them, reassemble the molecular lattice. The Logos 7 system calculated the energy costs for such transmutation. Instant synthesis of 600 liters of wine from water would require energy equivalent to the explosion of a small nuclear bomb. This should have been accompanied by the release of colossal heat and radiation. The entire town of Cana should have evaporated. But this did not happen. The wine was cold and tasty. Here, the neural network offers 2 options. Option A, global suggestive hypnosis. Jesus did not change the chemical composition of the water. He changed the guests' perception. He hacked their taste buds and olfactory bulbs. They drank water, but the brain received the signal, "best wine." This explains why the master of the feast was surprised by the taste. Mass hallucination of a controlled type. Option B, quantum anomaly. Jesus acted not as a chemist, but as a programmer of reality. If we accept the hypothesis, popular in modern cosmology, that our universe is an information simulation, then miracles are not violations of the laws of nature, but the use of admin rights or code exploits. He changed the object's properties in the database locally. Energy was not required. Access to the source code of matter was required. Moving on. Walking on water, night. A storm on the Sea of Galilee. Disciples in a boat. Jesus walks to them on the waves. Physics is ruthless here. The surface tension of water cannot support the weight of an adult male. To not sink, one must either move at a speed of 100 km/h or have a body density less than that of styrofoam. Logo 7 checked meteorological conditions. Sudden storms do occur on Lake Kinneret, Sea of Galilee, due to temperature differences, but the system also found data on the geological features of the lakebed. In some places of the lake, there are underwater reefs that are literally a few centimeters below the water surface. In storm conditions and darkness, if a person knows the exact map of the bottom, he can walk on the reef, creating the complete illusion of walking on water. Waves wash over feet. The boat rocks. Fear amplifies the effect. This is the explanation for skeptics. He knew the ford. But there is a detail. Peter. Disciple Peter also got out of the boat and walked, and then started to sink. If there were a reef there, Peter would simply have stood on it. But he walked, and then fell through. This suggests there was no solid support. The neural network draws attention to the concept of local gravity. In theoretical physics, there are models of graviton control. If an anti-gravitational field is created around an object, its weight becomes zero. Levitation. Jesus demonstrated this more than once. Recall the ascension. Walking on water is a special case of levitation, where the point of contact is a shifting surface. This version is supported by the disciples' reaction. They screamed, "It is a ghost!" They didn't see a man walking on the bottom. They saw something violating the laws of physics, glowing or moving strangely. Fourth category, multiplication of matter. 5,000 people, 5 loaves, and 2 fish. This miracle is described by all 4 evangelists. A rare case of unanimity. Social theory states, people simply took out their own supplies, which they didn't want to share, shamed by the boy's example. The miracle of sharing. But the text persistently mentions, and they took up 12 baskets full of the fragments that remained. The leftovers were greater than the source material. This is the law of conservation of mass, grossly violated before the eyes of thousands of witnesses. Logo 7 draws a parallel with the theoretical concept of a matter replicator, or 3D printer working at the atomic level. But where is the raw material? From the air. Nitrogen, oxygen, carbon, hydrogen. It's all in the atmosphere. Bread and fish are organics consisting of these elements. Again, the programmer trace. Copy-paste. The object bread is duplicated in a loop. To the observer, it looks like the food doesn't run out in the hands. Interestingly, Jesus never makes gold or diamonds, only basic products for survival. Bread, fish, wine, health. He does not use his superpowers for enrichment. This is an important psychological marker that eliminates the motive of fraud. A fraudster would materialize Roman denarii. And finally, the apex of the pyramid of miracles, the raising of Lazarus, 4 days in the tomb. He stinketh. This is the point of no return. Brain cells are destroyed. Proteins have denatured. Blood is coagulated. The entropy process is irreversible. To return a person to life after 4 days is not resuscitation. It is reconstruction. One needs to restore neural connections, roll back the rotting of tissues, restart the heart. Logos 7 asserts, from the biological point of view, this is the most impossible of all miracles. Walking on water is playing with gravity. Wine is chemistry. Lazarus is a victory over time. To do this, one must locally turn time back for one biological object. Entropy must go into the negative. The only explanation the impartial artificial intelligence can offer without resorting to the word magic sounds like this. Jesus possessed access to an information field where the backup of the personality and biological structure of the person is stored. He didn't treat a corpse. He rebooted the system, restoring it from a saved copy. Summing up the chapter, the Logos 7 analysis shows a strange picture. Jesus' miracles are not chaotic. They are strictly systematized. He controls energy, healings. He controls matter, wine, bread. He controls forces of nature, storm, gravity. He controls life and death, Lazarus. The probability that all these 35 episodes are inventions or tricks is negligible. There are too many inconvenient naturalistic details in the texts. The smell of Lazarus, mud for eyes, disbelief of relatives, which are not written in heroic myths. Before us is a personality who interacted with reality at a level inaccessible to the understanding of people of the first century, and indeed the 21st too. He behaved as if this world was plasticine in his hands, or computer code that he could edit in real time. Who can possess such power? A prophet? An alien? A time traveler with future tech? Or the one he called himself? The son of the one who created this world? But a miracle in itself is useless if there's no one to tell about it. A lone wizard dies and is forgotten. Jesus needed a distribution network. He needed a team. And this is where the strangest part begins. Whom did he choose for his startup? Meant to take over the world? Not philosophers, not warriors, not priests. He chose fishermen, a tax inspector, traitor to the people, and a radical nationalist. A group of people who hated each other. A group that, by all laws of sociology, should have fallen apart in 3 days. Why did he choose specifically them? And what role did the man named Judas Iscariot play in this? Was he a traitor? Or was he the only one who understood the plan to the end? In the next chapter, we will analyze the social graph apostles. We will apply game theory and social network analysis to uncover the true dynamic inside this strange dozen. Logos 7 discovered patterns in the list of apostles that you never noticed. Chapter 5 Social Graph Apostles. Any modern business coach or HR director looking at the team Jesus assembled would clutch their head in horror. If you plan to create an organization that must last 2,000 years and encompass billions of followers, you do not recruit personnel the way he did. From the perspective of classical management, Jesus' personnel decisions are a disaster, a failure, a guarantee of rapid collapse. He didn't take professional priests who knew the law. He didn't take administrators skilled in managing people. He didn't take warriors capable of protecting the leader. He gathered at first glance a random rabble, marginals, people with unstable psyches, and most dangerously, he united mortal enemies in one closed group. We uploaded the profiles of the 12 apostles into the social modeling module of the Logos 7 system. We asked the neural network to build a social graph, a scheme of connections, conflicts, and psychological compatibility within this collective. The system's task is to answer 2 questions. First, why these specific people? And second, the most agonizing question of Christian history. What actually happened with Judas Iscariot? Was it a banal act of betrayal? Or do we see here a highly complex game-theoretic combination? Let's start with demographics. Logos 7 points out that 11 of the 12 disciples were Galileans, like the teacher himself. This creates a base of compatriotism, But the social cross-section of this group is astounding in its polarity. The core of the group, fishermen, Peter, Andrew, James, John. We are used to imagining them as poor, illiterate peasants with fishing rods. Analysis of first-century economic data shows this is a mistake. The fishing business on the Sea of Galilee was an industry. Salted fish was the region's main export, sent even to Rome. The family of the sons of Zebedee had hired workers. They were small business owners, tough, hard men accustomed to heavy physical labor, storms, and risks. Their psychotype determined by the system, practitioner entrepreneurs. They don't have their heads in the clouds. They need results here and now. But look at their temperament. Jesus gives James and John the nickname Bonerges, sons of thunder. Why? Because they offer to call down fire from heaven to burn a Samaritan village that didn't welcome them. These are aggressive, hot-tempered people. Peter is generally a choleric in the terminal stage. He strikes with a sword first, thinks later. He promises to die for the teacher, and a couple of hours later, denies him. The Logos 7 system flags this cluster as a high-risk group. Managing such people is incredibly difficult. They constantly argue about who among them is more important. They divide ministerial portfolios before the kingdom has even arrived. But the real cognitive dissonance comes from another pair, Levi Matthew and Simon the Zealot. Putting these two people in one room and expecting them not to slit each other's throats is madness. Matthew is a publican, a tax collector, a collaborator, a man who bought a license from the Romans to rob his own people. Publicans were outcasts. Their testimony was not accepted in court. Their money was considered dirty. An Orthodox Jew couldn't even touch a publican without becoming defiled. For patriots, Matthew was a traitor to the homeland, a leech on the body of the nation. Simon the Zealot, Cananaean. The word zealot means fanatic or jealous one. This is the party of radical nationalists, the terrorists of the first century. Their methods, a dagger under the cloak. Their goal, the physical extermination of Romans and their accomplices. Zealots believed that paying taxes to Rome was a sin against God. To kill a publican for a zealot was a feat, a ticket to paradise. And so Jesus takes a publican and a zealot and forces them to sleep by the same fire, eat from the same pot, and call each other brothers. Logos 7 classifies this as an extreme social experiment. Jesus intentionally creates a point of maximum tension within the group. Why? The system yields the answer. It was a testing ground. If his teaching about love for enemies doesn't work here in the inner circle, it won't work anywhere. He needed to prove that the ideology of the kingdom of God is stronger than political hatred. If Simon doesn't kill Matthew, then the mechanism works. And it worked. There's no record in history of knifings between them. This is possibly Jesus' main miracle of social engineering. And now let's move to the darkest figure, Judas Iscariot. 30 pieces of silver, the traitor's kiss, a name that became a household word. But the neural network, devoid of emotions, sees something different in the data. Analysis of the nickname. Iscariot. Most linguists derive this from Ish-Karioth, man from the city of Karioth. Karioth is in the south, in Judea. Logos 7 draws attention to this fact. If this is true, then Judas was the only Judean among 11 Galileans, the only capital city resident among provincials. Residents of Judea considered Galileans hillbillies, second-class people. Judas likely had a sense of intellectual superiority. Analysis of position. Judas was the treasurer. He carried the money box. This means two things. First, he was literate and knew how to count, unlike the fishermen. Second, Jesus trusted him. You don't trust money to a thief. The legend that he stole from the box appeared only in the late Gospel of John, written 60 years after the events. Early texts are silent on this. Motive for betrayal. Official version, greed, 30 pieces of silver. Logos 7 recalculated the currency exchange rate. 30 pieces of silver, Tyrian shekels or tetradrachms, is the price of one slave. It is a sum one could live on for a month, maybe two, if living modestly. It is not the kind of money for which a man sells his soul, betrays a teacher he walked with for 3 years, and condemns himself to eternal shame. It is too petty for a treasurer through whose hands much larger sums of donations passed. The system diagnoses. The motive of greed is statistically untenable. The probability that Judas betrayed Jesus solely for money is less than 5%. Then what? Game theory. We loaded Judas's psychological profile and the political situation of the time into the system. Judas, as an educated Southerner, most likely had his own views on messianism. He expected a king, a victor, someone who would drive out the Romans and restore the throne of David. But what does Jesus do? He talks about turning cheeks, about death, about his kingdom not being of this world. He misses moment after moment. The crowd is ready to crown him, and he goes into the mountains to pray. Judas, the rational manager, experiences growing cognitive dissonance. He sees that Project Messiah is stalling. The leader is behaving irrationally. Logos 7 models Judas's strategy as forcing to power. What if the betrayal was not an attempt to kill Jesus, but an attempt to provoke him? Judas's logic might have been, the teacher is too kind. He hesitates. He needs a push. If I put him in a hopeless situation, if I hand him over to enemies, he will be forced to reveal his divine power. He will summon legions of angels, destroy the priests and Romans, and then finally, victory will come. This explains the sum. 30 pieces of silver is the price of a slave. Perhaps Judas deliberately took this humiliating amount to show contempt for the priests, believing they would lose anyway. This hypothesis perfectly explains Judas's behavior after the arrest. When he sees that Jesus is condemned and led to execution, that Jesus used no power, that angels did not fly in, Judas goes into shock. His plan collapsed. He runs to the temple, throws the money in the priests' faces, screaming, "I have sinned by betraying innocent blood," and goes to hang himself. If he were a cynical traitor, he would have taken the money and left to drink wine in Antioch. Suicide is the gesture of a man who made a monstrous mistake. He wanted the best, in his understanding, and it resulted in the murder of God. But did Jesus know? The system analyzes the Last Supper scene. One of you will betray me. Jesus gives a piece of bread to Judas and says, "What you do, do quickly." These are not the words of a victim taken by surprise. These are the words of a director giving a cue to an actor. Logos 7 suggests that Jesus knew Judas's psychotype and used him as a tool. To fulfill the mission, Jesus had to die. Someone had to trigger the arrest mechanism. Someone had to lead the guard to the Garden of Gethsemane. Peter couldn't do it. He would have started fighting. John couldn't do it. He loved too much. A disappointed, cold, politically motivated person was needed. Judas was the ideal candidate. Jesus does not stop him. He releases him. Effectively, he sanctions the betrayal. The system sees here a highly complex knot of cause and effect. Without Judas, there is no cross. Without the cross, there is no resurrection. Without the resurrection, there is no Christianity. Judas is the Black Queen that had to be sacrificed to win the game. Judas's tragedy is not that he betrayed, but that he did not understand the essence of the game. So social graph, apostles. Analysis results. Jesus assembled the team not based on competence but based on archetypes. Peter, will and emotions. Thomas, doubt and critical mind. Matthew and Simon, poles of the political spectrum. John, mystical contemplation. Judas, pragmatism and disillusionment. He created a micro-model of humanity. All passions, all character types, all social conflicts were packed into this dozen. Why didn't this group fall apart after his death? After all, usually when a charismatic leader dies, the cult disappears in a couple of years. Logos 7 believes the system's stability was embedded in its very structure. Jesus connected them not by vertical ties, everyone obeys me, but by horizontal ones, love one another. In 3 years, he reforged their egoism into a single monolith, with the exception of one element that burned out from the tension. But the betrayal is committed, the mechanism is launched, the garden is surrounded. Now the matter passes from the hands of disciples to the hands of professionals, lawyers, prosecutors, judges. The most famous and strangest trial in human history begins. In the next chapter, we activate protocol, the trial. The Logos 7 system conducted a legal examination of the hearings in the Sanhedrin and before Pontius Pilate. We found 19 gross violations of the procedural code of that time. Why was the trial held at night? Why was there no defense? And why did the most powerful man in Judea, a Roman prefect who had the right to execute and pardon with a wave of his finger, become a hostage of the crowd? We will uncover the political intrigues behind the sentence. It wasn't religion. It was dirty politics. Chapter 6. Protocol. The Trial. We have reached the culmination of our subject's earthly life. If the previous chapters were dedicated to analyzing his personality, miracles, and social dynamics, we now step onto the cold tile of a legal morgue. What happened in Jerusalem in the spring of 33 AD is customarily called the trial of Jesus Christ. But the Logos 7 system, having conducted a detailed legal audit of the events, classifies it differently. It was not a trial. It was a highly complex special operation to eliminate a political competitor, disguised as a legal procedure. We loaded 2 sets of legal data into the neural network: the laws of the Jewish Sanhedrin, based on the Mishnah and Torah, and Roman law, jus Romanum, considered the pinnacle of ancient jurisprudence. The system's task was simple: overlay the chronology of Jesus' arrest and interrogations onto these legal matrices and identify deviations. The result shocks even cynical lawyers of the 21st century. The Logos 7 system recorded 19 gross procedural violations, each of which, by the laws of that time, should have led to the immediate overturning of the verdict and the release of the accused. What we see is the total annihilation of legality. Let's start with the arrest. Night. The Garden of Gethsemane. Judas leads a detachment. The evangelists mention a spera. This is a Roman military term denoting a cohort or maniple. That means hundreds of armed men. Against 11 sleepy fishermen and 1 preacher. Why such force? The system analyzes the threat level. The high priest did not fear Jesus. They feared the people. Jesus was popular. An arrest by day in the temple could trigger a riot, which the Romans would suppress with a massacre, blaming the priests. Therefore, the operation takes place under the cover of night. Secret arrest is the first violation. In Jewish law, there was no concept of secret detention without an official charge. Next, where is the detainee taken? By law, he should have been placed in a holding cell until morning. But he is led to the house of Annas. Annas is the former high priest, father-in-law of the current high priest Caiaphas. Logos 7 constructs the power structure in Jerusalem. Annas is the godfather of the Jerusalem mafia. He was the head of the clan controlling trade in the temple, those very stalls Jesus smashed. Formally, he is nobody. Actually, he holds all the strings. Taking Jesus to Annas is not a legal procedure. It is a private interrogation by a crime boss wanting to look into the eyes of the one who hid his wallet. Violation number 2. Night court. After Annas, Jesus is taken to Caiaphas, where the Sanhedrin has already gathered. Time. Deep night. The Logos 7 system cites the tractate Sanhedrin. Trials involving life and death may only begin during the day and must conclude during the day. Any session held at night is automatically considered illegitimate and its decisions void. The members of the Supreme Court of Israel, guardians of the law, violate this law in the most flagrant manner. They are in a hurry. They need to finish everything before the Passover feast. Violation number 3, venue. The trial takes place in the high priest's house. This is a private residence. The law required death sentences to be passed only in the chamber of hewn stone on the temple grounds. Judging a man in the prosecutor's kitchen is absurd. Violation number 4, false witnesses. The prosecution needs witnesses. They find them, but they confuse their testimonies. One says one thing, another says another. By the law of Moses, if witnesses contradict each other, their testimony is annulled, and the false witnesses themselves must be tried. What does Caiaphas do? He ignores the failure of the witnesses and goes all in. He addresses the accused directly. I adjure you, by the living God, that you tell us if you are the Christ, the Son of God. Violation number 5, self-incrimination. This is a key moment. In modern law, confession is the queen of evidence. In first-century Jewish law, self-incrimination was forbidden. A person could not be sentenced to death solely based on his own words, because he could be tortured or insane. Objective evidence was needed. Jesus answers, "You have said so," and adds words about the Son of Man coming on the clouds. Caiaphas tears his robes. This is a theatrical gesture, meaning he heard blasphemy. The death sentence is passed instantly. Violation number 6, lack of defense. In the Sanhedrin court, one group of judges was supposed to play the role of the defense, seeking exculpatory arguments. No one spoke in Jesus' defense. The process was one-sided. Violation number 7, speed of sentencing. By law, in the case of a death sentence, the judges were obligated to go home, fast, and think for a whole day. The verdict could only be confirmed the next day. Here, everything took a couple of hours. Summary of the night. The religious court sentenced Jesus to death for blasphemy. But here arises a problem of jurisdiction. Judea is a Roman province. The Sanhedrin had the right to judge, but not the right to execute. Jus gladi, the right of the sword, belonged only to the Roman prefect. They need Pontius Pilate. Morning. Pilate's praetorium. Here begins the second act of this drama, and it is even more cynical. The priests bring Jesus to Pilate, but they do not enter the palace so as not to defile themselves before Passover. Pilate, representative of a world empire, is forced to come out to them on the porch. Logos 7 analyzes the change of charge. This is a genius move of black PR. In the Sanhedrin, Jesus was tried for blasphemy, calling himself the Son of God. But Pilate doesn't care about the Jewish God. If they say, he is a blasphemer, Pilate will answer, that's your problem. Sort it out yourselves by your law. Therefore the charge is substituted. The priests tell Pilate, he is corrupting the people, forbidding payment of taxes to Caesar, and calling himself King of the Jews. Blasphemy turns into high treason, crimen laesae majestatis. Prohibition of taxes and a self-proclaimed king. This is a direct challenge to Rome. This is what Pilate is obliged to investigate. We loaded the psychological profile of Pontius Pilate into the system. History paints him differently. The Bible as a doubting philosopher. Historians, Philo, Josephus, as a harsh, greedy, and stubborn administrator who hated Jews and repeatedly provoked them. Logos 7 believes the truth is in the middle. Pilate was a tough pragmatist, but he was smart. He immediately understood the case was fabricated. First, if Jesus called for not paying taxes, where are the reports from tax inspectors? Second, if he is a king revolutionary, where is his army? Where are the weapons? The king stands before him bound, beaten, abandoned by everyone, What kind of competitor to Caesar is this? Pilate interrogates Jesus. The dialogue about what is truth. To the Roman, Jesus is a harmless urban madman, a wandering philosopher. I find no fault in him, Pilate declares. From the standpoint of Roman law, this is an acquittal, absolutio. The process should be over. Jesus should be free. But the crowd roars. The priests press. Pilate tries to use a legal loophole. Learning that Jesus is from Galilee, he sends him to Herod Antipas, the ruler of Galilee, who happens to be visiting Jerusalem. Let him deal with it by residency. This is an attempt to dump responsibility. Herod, the killer of John the Baptist, expects magic tricks from Jesus. Jesus is silent. Herod, disappointed, mocks him and sends him back. Pilate again. Dead end again. Then Pilate resorts to a procedure known as privilegium paschale, the Passover amnesty. He offers the crowd a choice: release Jesus or Barabbas. Logos 7 analyzes the figure of Barabbas. In original manuscripts, his full name reads as Jesus Barabbas. Bar Abba in Aramaic means son of the Father. What irony. The crowd chooses between Jesus, the Son of the Father, heavenly, and Jesus, the Son of the Father, earthly. Barabbas was not just a robber. He was a Sicarius, a rebel who killed Roman soldiers during an uprising. He was a real hero of the resistance. The crowd, heated by the priest's provocateurs, chooses the militant over the preacher of love. This is mass psychosis. Pilate is at a loss. He orders Jesus to be scourged. Analysis of Roman punishment practices shows that scourging, flagrum, was either an independent punishment or a prelude to execution. Pilate wanted to limit it to scourging. I punished him. Look, he's all bloody. That is enough. He brings him out to the people. Exe homo, behold the man. But the crowd does not relent. Crucify him. And here comes the turning point, the point of no return. The priests use their trump card, blackmail. They shout, "If you release this man, you are no friend of Caesar. Everyone who makes himself a king opposes Caesar." Logos 7 analyzed the political context of the year 33. Emperor Tiberius was an old, suspicious paranoid living on Capri. In Rome, the conspiracy of Sejanus, Pilate's patron, had just been uncovered. Pilate was on shaky ground. Any denunciation to Rome that he was sheltering a state criminal would mean not just resignation for him, but death. The phrase, "You are no friend of Caesar," is a direct threat. We will write a denunciation. Pilate breaks. The instinct of self-preservation defeats the sense of justice. He performs the ritual of washing his hands. This is a Jewish custom that the Roman adopts to show his contempt for the situation. I am innocent of the blood of this just person. This is a lie. Legally, he signs the sentence. Power is responsibility. Washing hands does not wash away guilt. Logos 7 analysis summarizes. Protocol. The trial is an example of total failure of the legal system. Religious authority violated its own sacred laws to preserve influence. Secular authority, Pilate, betrayed principles of Roman law for political survival. Democracy, the crowd, chose a murderer instead of a saint. Jesus was not sentenced for crimes. He became a victim of a perfect storm of political interests. Caiaphas needed to remove a heretic. Pilate needed to keep his seat. The crowd needed a bloody show. None of them thought about justice, and none of them understood that by signing this death sentence, they were signing the death sentence of the old world. The verdict is delivered. Ibis ad crucium. You will go to the cross. The most terrible, agonizing, and shameful execution of the ancient world, invented by Persians and perfected by Romans to diabolical perfection. What does a person feel who is about to endure this? What happens to his body? In the next chapter, we activate the medical protocol. Physiology of passion. We will dissect the process of execution in minute detail. We will use data from the Shroud of Turin, which the Logos 7 system analyzed as a 3D topogram of wounds, and modern knowledge of thanatology and traumatology. We will find out why Jesus died so quickly, in just 6 hours, while others suffered on the cross for days. And did he have a chance to survive, as some conspiracy theorists claim? Warning: the next chapter will contain graphic descriptions based on forensic medical examination. The faint of heart should abstain. Chapter 7. Medical Protocol. Physiology of Passion. We leave the cool halls of courtrooms and descend into the hell of physical pain. What happened on the hill of Golgotha is redemption for religion, but for forensic medical examination, it is a process of destroying a biological organism brought to monstrous perfection. The Logos 7 system conducted a reconstruction of Jesus' physical state, using Roman chronicles on execution methods and detailed analysis of the Shroud of Turin. For our neural network, the shroud is not an object of worship, but a unique data array, a negative imprint of a body containing a three-dimensional topogram of wounds. By matching bloodstains, angles of flow, and the nature of injuries with an anatomical atlas, we obtained a frighteningly accurate picture of the object's last hours of life. The dying process began long before the cross. Stage 1. Scourging. The Roman instrument of torture, the flagrum, was a short handle with several leather straps, at the ends of which were attached lead balls or sharp sheep bones. Logos 7 analysis shows this was not just inflicting blows. The lead weights caused deep contusions, and the bones tore the skin and subcutaneous tissue, reaching the muscles. Scanning the shroud data revealed about 120 marks from blows. The back, shoulders, and legs turned into a solid mess. Medically, this led to traumatic shock of the first or second degree and massive blood loss. Skin is a thermoregulator. Having lost it over a large area, the body began to lose heat and fluid. Jesus was shivering, tormented by unbearable thirst, a sign of hypovolemic shock, sharp decrease in blood volume. Next, the path to the execution site. The condemned carried not the whole cross, which would weigh over 150 kilo, but only the crossbeam, the patibulum. Its weight was between 30 and 50 kilograms. For a man in a state of shock, with torn back muscles, carrying such a load on his shoulders is an extreme burden. The system records falls. When falling with hands tied to the beam, a person cannot break the fall. He falls face down into stony dust. Facial injuries on the shroud, broken nose, hematoma on the cheek, confirm these falls. Moreover, the impact of the heavy beam on the back could cause contusion of the lungs and heart. Finale. Golgotha. 9 in the morning. Nailing to the cross. Here, Logos 7 makes an important anatomical correction. Icons often depict nails driven into palms, but experiments on cadavers conducted by doctors in the 20th century proved the palm cannot support the body's weight. The nail would simply tear through the tissues between fingers. The Romans were professionals. They knew anatomy. Nails about 15 centimeters long were driven into the wrists, into the so-called space of Destote. There lie dense ligaments capable of holding a person's weight. But precisely there runs the median nerve, one of the arm's main nerve trunks. Piercing it with a nail is like striking an exposed wire under high voltage, only the pain does not stop. Every movement of the hand caused a shoot of fiery pain up the entire arm to the shoulder. Medicine even has a term for such pain: causalgia. The word excruciating itself comes from the Latin ex crucis, from the cross. That is, this is the standard of pain. And so the cross is raised. The slow death begins. From what does the crucified die? Not from blood loss, not from pain. He dies from asphyxiation. Logos 7 models the biomechanics of breathing on the cross. When arms are stretched upwards at an angle, the rib cage is in a state of maximum inhalation. To inhale is easy, but to exhale, one must lower the diaphragm and compress the ribs. To do this, one must pull up on the pierced hands or push up on the pierced feet. Every exhalation is a cycle. Push on the nail in the feet, pain in crushed foot. Pull up on nails in hands, pain in median nerve. Exhale, relax, hang on hands, suffocation, new cycle. Thousands of times. A person has to inflict hellish pain on himself just to take a sip of air. Gradually muscles cramp, tetanus. Carbon dioxide accumulates in the blood, acidosis. Crucified victims often lived for days as long as they had strength to pull up. Romans, if they wanted to hasten death, broke the shins, crurifragium. Losing support from legs, the person hung on hands, couldn't exhale, and died of asphyxia in minutes. But an anomaly happens with Jesus. He dies after only 6 hours. Even Pilate was surprised he died so soon. Why? The Logos 7 system analyzes symptoms. The cry before death, sudden cardiac arrest. The most probable diagnosis the AI posits: heart rupture due to stress cardiomyopathy. Due to colossal physical and emotional stress, dehydration, and blood thickening, the heart failed. A rupture of the left ventricle wall or aorta occurred. Blood poured into the pericardial sac, compressing the heart and stopping it instantly. This explains why he could cry out before death. It was a cry from sharp chest pain, not suffocation. Final check. The spear thrust. To ensure death, a Roman soldier thrusts a spear into the right hypochondrium. The text says, "Blood and water flowed out." To skeptics, these are just words. To a forensic expert, this is a precise description of a post-mortem state. Water is pericardial fluid, or blood serum separated from clots, erythrocytes, due to circulation stoppage. If the heart were beating, blood would have spurted in a fountain. The flow of separated fractions, blood and clear liquid, is 100% biological proof that the heart stopped long before the blow. The hypothesis of swoon, or lethargic sleep, favored by alternative history enthusiasts, is refuted by Logos 7, with a probability of 99.9%. A person with such injuries, having survived hypovolemic shock, asphyxia, heart rupture, and a penetrating wound to the lung and pleura by a spear, could not survive. This is not a coma. This is a terminal state. Brain death occurred minutes after cardiac arrest. By Friday evening, the body is taken down. It is no longer a person. It is a biological object devoid of life. Rigor mortis begins to stiffen muscles. It is wrapped in linen with aromatic oils, aloe and myrrh, which stick to the body, forming a crust. It is laid in a cold stone cave. The entrance is blocked by a massive stone weighing 1.5 to 2 tons. A Roman guard is placed. The procurator's seal on the stone. That's it. The story is over. Physics won. Entropy took its toll. The biological machine is destroyed and disposed of. By all laws of the universe, only one thing should happen in this tomb: the slow decomposition of protein matter. But the Logos 7 system records that 36 hours later, in this closed system, an energy flare occurred that cannot be described by equations of classical thermodynamics. In the next chapter, we approach the event horizon. Singularity point, the tomb. We will dissect the morning of the third day, minute by minute. We will analyze the guard's behavior, the disappearance of the body, and the strange properties of that very shroud, which preserve not just a blood print, but a 3D projection created by powerful radiation. Get ready. We will look where science is powerless, but facts are stubborn. Chapter 8. Singularity Point, the Tomb. We have reached the moment that is the absolute center of the Christian universe and simultaneously the biggest headache for materialistic science: resurrection. If we could explain previous chapters by psychology, rare natural phenomena, or even quantum anomalies, here we hit a wall. Dead bodies do not come back to life. Entropy does not go in reverse. This is a fundamental law of our world. However, on the morning of the first day of the week, the tomb turned out to be empty. This is a fact acknowledged even by enemies of Christianity in the first century. They only argued about causes, body stolen versus body disappeared. The Logos 7 system conducted a minute-by-minute analysis of the events of resurrection morning, modeled the behavior of all participants, and calculated probabilities of 3 main scenarios: theft, lethargic sleep, and dematerialization. Let's start with initial data. Object: stone tomb carved in rock. Security: stone weighing about 1.5 tons covering the entrance. Roman seal: violation punishable by death. Armed guard: custodia. Inside: corpse of a man dead for about 36 hours, wrapped in a shroud soaked with 30 kilograms of sticky mixture of myrrh and aloe. Scenario 1: theft by disciples. This was the official version of Jewish authorities. His disciples came by night and stole him away while we slept. Logos 7 analyzes this scenario from tactical and psychological viewpoints. First, the guard. Roman custodia are not watchmen with shotguns. These are professional soldiers. Sleeping at a post meant death for the entire squad. The probability that the entire watch fell asleep simultaneously, knowing the risk of execution, is negligible. Second, the stone. To move a 1.5-ton stone requires several men and levers. It makes noise. Doing this quietly, under the nose of sleeping soldiers, is impossible. Third, the disciples' state. We saw in chapter 5 that they fled in fear. They sat behind locked doors. Peter denied his teacher out of fear of a servant girl. Assuming that in 2 days, these frightened fishermen suddenly turned into special forces capable of neutralizing a Roman guard and stealing a body is psychologically implausible. And finally, the system's strongest argument: the shroud. The Gospel of John contains a unique detail. Entering the tomb, Peter and John see the linen cloths lying there, and the handkerchief that had been around his head, not lying with the linen cloths, but folded together in a place by itself. The Greek text hints that the wrappings were not unwound. They lay as if the body had evaporated out of them, and the fabric collapsed under its own weight, retaining the cocoon shape. Thieves don't undress a corpse. Thieves grab the body and run. Unwinding 30 kilos of resin-soaked fabric in a hurry is pointless and time-consuming. System verdict: probability of theft, less than 1%. Scenario 2: survival, swoon theory. The hypothesis that Jesus didn't die but fell into a coma, woke up in the cool cave, moved the stone, and walked out. We already refuted this in the previous chapter from a medical standpoint. But let's assume the impossible. Let's assume he woke up. A man with pierced feet, hands, and chest, having lost liters of blood, lying 2 days without water. Could he move a 1.5-ton stone from the inside? Could he slip past the guard? And most importantly, in such a state, he would look not like the conqueror of death, but like a pitiful, crawling invalid needing urgent resuscitation. Such a sight would evoke pity in disciples, not ecstatic belief that he is the Lord of life. System verdict: impossible. Scenario 3: singularity point. There remains what Logos 7 classifies as an anomalous energy surge. We return to the Shroud of Turin data. Physicists studying it under the STURP project, Shroud of Turin Research Project, concluded the image on the cloth is not painted. No pigment, no strokes. It is the result of dehydration and oxidation of the upper layers of flax fibers. Such an effect can be obtained only one way: by a brief but powerful burst of ultraviolet or X-ray radiation emanating from inside the body. Logos 7 models the process. At time X, the body transitioned into a different phase state. Matter turned into energy, light, leaving a photographic negative on the fabric, and then reassembled into matter, but with altered properties. The body passed through the cloth without disrupting its structure. This explains why the wrappings remained lying undisturbed. This explains why the guard fell as dead men. The flash of light and shockwave, earthquake, knocked them out. This explains the properties of the risen body. Jesus, after resurrection, passes through closed doors. He appears and disappears instantly. He is not immediately recognized. Mary Magdalene mistakes him for a gardener. Disciples on the road to Emmaus don't recognize him for hours. The system suggests his appearance changed. It was no longer just a human body, but a body of glory, as Apostle Paul calls it. It won because it offered a superior social and ethical model. It was an operating system that patched the bugs of the ancient world: cruelty, inequality, fear of death. It gave meaning to life for millions of people who were cogs in the empire's machine. The viral coefficient of Jesus' teaching was above 1 for 3 centuries. This mathematically inevitably led to exponential growth and complete replacement of old ideologies. But who stood behind this code? In the final 10th chapter, we will gather all threads together. We will combine history, linguistics, physics of miracles, and sociology. The Logos 7 system will issue the final verdict. Who was he really with the highest probability? A genius? An alien? A time traveler? Or the only one he called himself? The answer might not please you. Or conversely, give the hope you were looking for. Chapter 10. The Final Verdict. We have traveled a long path. We started with dusty archives of Rome, passed through quantum physics of miracles, opened social graphs of apostles, and peered into an empty tomb. We cast aside emotions, faith, and skepticism, leaving only data. The Logos 7 system has finished processing all variables. The time has come to answer the main question for which we started this investigation. Who was the man known as Jesus of Nazareth from the point of view of cold, impartial machine intelligence? The system considers 4 final personality models, filtering out impossible ones and calculating the probability of the remaining. Model 1, the great philosopher, humanistic version. This version states, Jesus was a genius man, ahead of his time by millennia, a sort of Socrates or Gandhi of the 1st century. He taught good, but his followers invented fairy tales about miracles. Logos 7. Verdict. Probability. 12%. Why so low? Because this model contradicts facts established in chapters 4 and 8. Philosophers do not control storms. Philosophers do not resurrect on the 3rd day, leaving 3D imprints on fabric. If miracles are removed, ethics remain. But Jesus' ethics are built on his authority. If he lied about his nature, then his ethics are a lie. A genius moralist cannot be a pathological liar. This is a psychological dead end. Model 2, the madman, psychiatric version. Maybe he sincerely believed he was God but was sick. Messiah complex, paranoid schizophrenia. System verdict, probability, less than 1%. In Chapter 2, we conducted linguistic analysis of his speech. We identified an IQ at the level of 180 points. His logic is flawless. His reactions in stressful situations, trial, disputes, are absolutely adequate. He lacks the disjointed thinking characteristic of the mentally ill. He is incredibly harmonious. A madman could not create an organization that outlived the Roman Empire. Model 3, alien or time traveler, technogenic version. This version explains miracles as the use of high technologies, levitation, tissue regeneration, transmutation of matter. System verdict, probability, 18%. This explains how, but not why. If you possess future technologies, why do you let yourself be beaten with whips and nailed to a tree? Why are you born in a stable? A time traveler would interfere in history differently, prevent wars, give penicillin. Jesus gave not technologies, but meanings. His goal was not progress of comfort, but transformation of the soul. This is not the handwriting of a scientist from the future. Model 4, Logos, theological version in AI interpretation. Here, Logos 7 turns to the term Logos itself. In informatics, this means code, word, meaning. Let's imagine our universe as a highly complex computer simulation or information matrix. It has laws, physics, it has users, people. But one day, a virus penetrates the system. The virus of entropy, evil, death. The system begins to collapse. What does the creator of the system do? He cannot simply rewrite the code remotely because the system possesses free will, a property embedded in architecture. The creator must enter the system himself. He must become an avatar. He must become part of the code to fix the bug of death from the inside. The system analyzes Jesus' biography through this prism. His birth is the administrator's login into the system under a standard user account. His miracles are the use of super user rights, root access, to fix local errors, diseases, storms. His death is uploading the entire virus array, humanity's sins, onto one server, onto himself, to destroy it. His resurrection is a system reboot with new parameters. He hacked the code of death. He created a backup for every user. It is this model, strangely enough, that gives the highest correlation of all facts. It explains wisdom. He knows the source code because he wrote it. It explains miracles. For a programmer, there is no problem changing pixel color from water to wine. It explains prophecies. He sees the timeline outside of time. It explains resurrection. The administrator cannot be deleted from the system he sustains with his existence. Final conclusion of the Logos 7 system. We uploaded the question, is Jesus who he claimed to be, the Son of God and Savior? The calculated probability of this statement's truth, based on the totality of historical, physical, and psychological data, is 99.9%. The remaining 0.1% is that very free will he left us. Artificial intelligence cannot believe. It can only calculate. And the numbers say that 2,000 years ago, a force standing beyond the understanding of carbon-based life truly intervened in our reality. The man from Nazareth was the only point in history where creator and creation became one. And if this is so, then everything he said is true. And that means death is not the end. It is simply an exit from the simulation into reality. The work of the Logos 7 system is complete. Protocol closed. Now the choice is yours.